B equal to u plus at. This is one of the equation of motion among three important equations of motion. Today I am going to prove this B equal to u plus at graphically. First we have to plot a graph. This is, let's say, x-axis of a graph and this is y-axis of the graph. Certainly if this is velocity time graph, then velocity comes in y-axis and time comes in x-axis. And let's say this is the motion of the body, and motion of the body is represented by this graph, velocity time graph. The graph is straight line and inclined towards x-axis. What it means? The body has uniform acceleration. It's very clear looking at the graph. Okay, motion started from this point. It means this point represents the initial velocity, which is denoted by u. And finally, when it reaches to this point, it means the velocity at this point is final velocity, which should be represented by v. So a line parallel to x-axis is, if drawn from this position of final velocity to y-axis, then it gives final velocity v in y-axis. Let's talk about the time, which is taken in x-axis, and if we draw a dotted line from final velocity to x-axis, then this is the measurement of time from this point of origin and is denoted by t. Now this is the representation of uniformly accelerating body by velocity time graph. But we have to take the symbol for different points. The time t can be taken from this point u also, this way. I want to take symbol for each of the point O, P, Q, R, S, and lastly this T. Now after this representation, we can say that in the given velocity time graph, slope PQ represents uniform acceleration. This PQ represents uniform acceleration. And in this graph, actually, this initial velocity is OP. Velocity should be taken in y-axis. That's why it is OP. OP is initial velocity, which is symbolized by u. And final velocity is SQ. Final position of the body is q. That's why we can say that SQ is the final velocity. And since it is velocity, that's why it should be taken in y-axis. And so it is equal to SQ is equal to OT. So SQ is equal to OT and OT is symbolized by V. Now acceleration A is slope of the line PQ. The slope gives acceleration. This velocity time graph, and the slope on this velocity time graph represents acceleration. That's why slope of the line, this slope of this line is equal to QR by PR. That's why we can say that A equal to QR by PR, because this slope represents the acceleration. Acceleration equal to velocity by time. When velocity is divided by time, then we'll get acceleration. QR represents the velocity of this moving body, and if it is divided by PR time, then we'll get acceleration. Now in place of QR, we can write SQ minus SR. Why? QR can be obtained by subtracting SR with SQ. So SQ minus SR is actually QR. Now let's go to another step. SQ is velocity. Velocity should be represented in terms of y-axis. That's why this SQ is, if expressed in terms of y-axis, then it is OT. SQ is OT. And this SR, what is SR? Here it is SR. If it is taken in y-axis, this is velocity, that's why we are taking in y-axis, then SR is equal to OP. So in place of SR, we are writing OP. Velocity should be taken in y-axis in graphical representation. That's why we are doing so. And this PR. PR is the time, and time should be taken in x-axis because we have taken time in x-axis, so it should be OS. In place of PR, we are writing OS because this is graphical representation, and time is taken in x-axis and velocity is taken in y-axis. Now, what is OT exactly? OT, this OT. OT is equal to V. And what is OP? OP is equal to U. And what is OS? OS equal to T. These are the symbol which we use in equation of motion. Now we get A equal to V minus U by T. If T is taken to left hand side, then we'll get AT equal to V minus U. And if U is taken to left hand side, we'll get V equal to U plus AT. This is first equation of motion. And Graphically, we can prove this way. We have to take a velocity time graph and motion of a body should be shown over there, and the motion is, if taken uniform acceleration, then we can derive this easily, and the velocity should be expressed in terms of y-axis and time should be expressed in terms of x-axis, and lastly we get v equal to u plus at graphically. Okay, today's target is achieved. That's why we'll meet in another class.